The envelope was heavy, it was cream-colored, textured like linen, and the calligraphy on the front was embossed in actual gold leaf. It looked less like a wedding invitation and more like a royal decree. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it, and I felt a bitter taste rise in the back of my throat. Mark and Jessica invite you to witness their union. Mark, my husband of 7 years, the man who had looked me in the eye 10 months ago and told me that I was stagnant, that I was holding him back, that I was a Honda Civic in a world full of Ferrari sand. Jessica, his 24-year-old assistant, the woman who laughed at his jokes a little too loudly and wore skirts a little too short for the corporate office where they both work. Sending me an invitation wasn't a gesture of goodwill. It was a weapon. Mark wanted me there. He wanted me to see the vineyard, the imported flowers, the designer gown, and the sheer magnitude of the life he was building without me. He wanted to prove that he was right, that he had traded up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at that invitation. My hand trembled just a little. A normal person would have thrown it in the trash. A normal person would have burned it, but I didn't throw it away. Placed it gently on the counter. I picked up my phone and I dialed a number I hadn't used in a very long time. Mr. Sterling, I said when the voice answered. It's Elena. I've decided to accept the invitation to the wedding, and I think it's time we make that announcement we discussed. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in 10 months, I smiled. Mark wanted a show. I was going to give him one to understand why I went to that wedding. You have to understand who Mark and I used to be. We met in college. We were both broke students surviving on instant noodles and ambition. Mark was charismatic, handsome, and full of big dreams. He wanted to rule the corporate world. He wanted to be a CEO by 35. He talked about legacy and empires. While we sat on the floor of his studio apartment because he couldn't afford a couch, I fell in love with his drive. I fell in love with the way he looked at me. Like I was the only person who understood his vision. I was different. I was quiet. I was studying library science. I liked old books, rainy days, and silence. Mark called me his anchor. He said I kept him grounded when his head got too big. When we graduated, we got married at the courthouse. I wore a white sundress I bought on clearance. We ate dinner at a diner afterwards. It was perfect, or at least I thought it was for the first 5 years. I worked 2 jobs. I was a librarian by day and a freelance editor by night. Every extra cent I made went to Mark. I paid off his student loans. I paid for his expensive suits so he looked the part in interviews. I paid the rent so he could take unpaid internships that offered exposure. I was the foundation he built his skyscraper on. But the thing about foundations is that once the building is tall enough, nobody looks at the ground anymore. They only look at the sky. Mark started climbing the ladder at a mid-sized marketing firm called Nexus Solutions. He started making real money. And as the zeros in his bank account grew, the distance between us grew too. He stopped coming home for dinner. He stopped asking about my day. He started criticizing me. Why do you wear that sweater, Elena? It looks moth-eaten. Why don't you get your hair done? It's so frizzy. I can't take you to the company gala looking like a librarian. You need to look like a wife. It hurt like a physical blow. Every time I tried to change, I bought nicer clothes. I tried to talk about business, but it was never enough. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday, raining. I remember the sound of the rain hitting the window pane, a relentless tapping rhythm. Mark came home late. He didn't kiss me hello. He didn't take off his coat. He just stood in the living room, looking at me with eyes that were colder than the winter wind. We need to talk, he said. My stomach dropped. I knew those words. Everyone knows those words. I'm leaving, Elena. He said. He didn't even sound sad. He sounded impatient, like he was firing an employee who wasn't performing well. Leaving? I whispered. For how long? For good. He said, I've met someone who matches me, someone who understands the world I live in now. Jessica. I said. It wasn't a question. I had seen the texts popping up on his phone. I had smelled the perfume on his shirts, a cloying, sweet scent that smelled like expensive candy. She's ambitious, Elena, Mark said, his voice rising. She pushes me. You're just comfortable. You're safe. I don't want safe anymore. I want elite. He looked around our living room, the room I had painted, the furniture I had saved up for. I'm taking the car, he said, and I've already spoken to a lawyer since I've been the primary earner for the last 2 years. I'm keeping the savings account. It's only fair. You have your little library job. You'll be fine. He walked out the door. He didn't look back. I stood there for hours. I didn't cry. I was in too much shock to cry. I just felt hollowed out. I had given him everything, my youth, my money, my support, my heart, and he had discarded me because he thought he had outgrown me. He thought I was poor. He thought I was simple. He had no idea who I really was, you see. There was something I never told Mark. It wasn't that I lied to him. I just omitted the truth when we met. I wanted to be loved for me, not for my last name, and by the time we were married, I was waiting for the right moment to tell him, but life always got in the way, and then as he became obsessed with money, I became afraid to tell him. I was afraid he would love the money more than he loved Memi. Last name isn't just Vance. My mother's maiden name is Harrington, as in the Harrington Trust. My grandfather was Silas Harrington, a steel and shipping magnate who diversified into tech in the 90s when he passed away 3 years ago. He didn't leave his empire to his sons. They were greedy and incompetent. He left it to me, his quiet, book-loving granddaughter, who actually listened to him when he talked about business ethics. I was the sole owner of a portfolio worth billions. I had kept it entirely separate from my marriage. The money sat in trusts, managed by a board of directors. I lived on my librarian salary because I liked it. I liked the simplicity. I wanted a real life. Mark thought I was broke because I chose to live modestly. He thought I couldn't afford nicer clothes because I was saving pennies. In reality, I could have bought his entire company with a wire transfer and not even checked the balance during the divorce. I made a choice. I could have crushed him then. I could have hired the best lawyers in the country. I could have revealed my assets and fought him for every dime, but I didn't. He wanted to see who he really was, so I played the part of the scorned, poor ex-wife. I let him bully me into a small settlement. I let him take the car. I let him take the savings account we had built, which was mostly his money from the last 2 years anyway. I signed the papers. I let him walk away thinking he had won. I remember the day we left the mediation office. Jessica was waiting for him in the lobby. She was wearing a white blazer and sunglasses, looking like she was posing for a magazine cover. She smirked at me as I walked out with my cardboard box of files. "Don't worry, Elena," she called out, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'll take good care of him. He needs a woman who can help him spend all that success." Mark laughed. He actually laughed. "Goodbye, Elena," he said. "Try to find someone more your speed, maybe a high school gym teacher." I walked to the bus stop because he had taken the car. I sat on the bench, watching them drive away in his BMW, and that was when the sadness turned into something else. It turned into ice. 8 months passed. I quit my job at the library, not because I didn't love it, but because I had work to do. I stepped into my role as the chairwoman of the Harrington Trust. I worked from the shadows. I didn't do press interviews. I didn't put my face on magazines. I let my board of directors be the public face of the company. I preferred to pull the strings from behind the curtain. I kept tabs on Mark. It wasn't hard. He was everywhere on social media, flaunting his new life. Mark and Jessica in Paris. Hashtag power couple. Mark buying a new Porsche. Hashtag success suggest showing off a diamond ring the size of a grape. Hashtag blessed. But I also knew things social media didn't show. I knew that Mark's company, Nexus Solutions, was struggling. They had lost 3 major clients in the last quarter. Mark was spending money. He didn't have to maintain the appearance of success. He was leveraging his future to pay for his present. Then the acquisition rumors started. A massive conglomerate, Sterling Dynamics, was looking to buy Nexus Solutions. Mark was ecstatic if the bid-out happened. He would be rich, real rich, not just credit card rich. He was banking everything on this deal. He was telling everyone he was going to be a VP at Sterling Dynamics, and then the invitation arrived. I knew exactly why he sent it. He wanted to rub my face in his victory. He thought the deal with Sterling was in the bag. He thought he was about to become a multi-millionaire. He wanted me to see him at his peak. What Mark didn't know was that Sterling Dynamics was a subsidiary. It was owned by a parent company, the Harrington Trust, my company. I held the invitation, and the plan formed in my mind instantly. It was petty. Maybe was it necessary? Absolutely. He invited me to a show. I was going to give him a finale. The wedding was held at Chateau Lumiere, a sprawling estate 3 hours north of the city. It was the kind of place that charged you $500 just to breathe the air. I arrived in a rented black sedan. I didn't want to tip my hand too Early eyes stepped out of the car. I wasn't wearing my old sweaters today. I was wearing a dress I had commissioned from a designer in Milana Deep. Midnight blue silk that fit like a second skin. It was elegant, understated, and cost more than Mark's annual salary. I wore my grandmother's sapphire stones so dark and clear they looked like pieces of the ocean. I walked toward the ceremony area. The guests were a mix of Mark's corporate friends, Jessica's vapid entourage, and a few uncomfortable-looking relatives. As I entered the garden, heads turned. People didn't recognize me at first. They were used to plain Elena. The woman walking through the grass today held her head high. Elena. I turned. It was Mark's mother, Janice. She had always been kind to me, though she was terrified of her son. "Hello, Janice," I said softly. "You look stunning," she whispered, grabbing my hand. "Are you sure you should be here?" "Mark, he's in a mood. He's very high on himself today." "I'll be fine, Janice," I said, patting her hand. I just wanted to wish them well. The ceremony was exactly what I expected. Vows that sounded like they were written by a PR team. Jessica promised to support his empire. Mark promised to give her the world she deserved. I sat in the back row, silent, watching the man I had once loved promise his life to a woman who only loved his wallet. After the ceremony came the reception. This was where the real display of wealth happened. A champagne tower, a 7-course meal, a live orchestra. Mark and Jessica made their grand entrance. They looked like royalty. Mark grabbed the microphone for a toast. "Thank you all for coming," he boomed, his face flushed with expensive scotch. "Today isn't just about love, it's about winning. It's about finding the partner who elevates you. Jessica is my queen, and together we are going to rule this city." The crowd cheered. Jessica preened. Mark scanned the room. His eyes landed on me at the back table. A smirk curled his lip. He hopped off the stage and walked over to me, pulling Jessica with him. The room went quiet. Everyone sensed the drama. "Elena," Mark announced, his voice loud enough to carry. "You actually came. I'm impressed. It takes guts to show up to your ex-husband's wedding alone." Jessica giggled. "Oh, stop it, baby. Nice. She probably just came for the free meal. I heard library funding got cut again." My blood boiled, but my face remained smooth as marble. "Congratulations, Mark." "Jessica," I said calmly, "it's quite a production. It's a celebration of success," Mark corrected, leaning in close. "See, Elena? This is what ambition buys you. I'm about to close the biggest deal of my life with Sterling Dynamics next week. I'll be on the board. I'll be making millions, and you, well, you're still you." "Yes," I said, taking a sip of my water. "I am still me. Don't be bitter," Jessica sneered. "Not everyone is cut out for the high life." "Mark!" A voice boomed from the stage. We all turned. Standing at the podium was Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. He was the keynote speaker. Mark had been bragging about for weeks. Having Arthur Sterling at your wedding was the ultimate status symbol. "Ah." Mark clapped his hands. "The big man speaks." "Excuse me, Elena, I have business to attend to." Mark strutted back to the front of the room, taking a seat of honor next to Jessica. Mr. Sterling adjusted the microphone. He was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a face carved from granite. He didn't look like he was in a partying mood. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur Sterling began, "Mark asked me to say a few words today. He wanted me to speak about the future." Mark raised his glass to Arthur, beaming. "The future is an interesting thing," Arthur continued. "It relies on integrity, it relies on honesty, and in business, it relies on knowing who you are dealing with." The room went very quiet. The tone was off. This wasn't a wedding toast. This sounded like a boardroom briefing. "Mark here," Arthur gestured to the groom, "has been very vocal about the acquisition of his company, Nexus Solutions, by my firm, Sterling Dynamics. He has told many of you that the deal is done, that his promotion is secured." Mark nodded aggressively, looking around the room for validation. "However," Arthur said, "there is a hierarchy in business. I am the CEO of Sterling Dynamics." "Yes, but Sterling Dynamics is owned by a parent company, a global holding trust that values ethics above profit." Mark looked confused. He whispered something to his best man. "The owner of that parent company," Arthur said, his eyes scanning the room, "is a very private person. She rarely attends events, she rarely interferes. But when she reviewed the audit of Nexus Solutions and when she reviewed the background of its proposed new vice president, Mr. Mark Daniels, she decided to step in personally. Mark froze, his glass hovered halfway to his mouth. She is here today. Arthur said, in fact, she is sitting right there. Arthur raised his hand and pointed a finger directly at the back of the room directly. At me, every head in the room turned. The silence was so heavy it felt like it could crush your lungs. May I introduce? Arthur's voice boomed. The chairwoman and sole owner of the Harrington Trust, Miss Elena Harrington. For a moment, nobody moved then. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor was the only sound in the room. I smoothed the silk of my dress. I picked up my clutch, and I began to walk toward the stage. The crowd parted from me like the Red Sea. I saw the shock on their faces. I saw former colleagues whispering, Harrington? The billionaire Harringtons? She owns Sterling Dynamics? She owns Mark's company? I walked up the stairs to the stage. Arthur Sterling stepped aside. Bowing his head slightly in respect, I stood behind the microphone. I looked down at the head table. Mark had gone pale, not just white-gray. He looked like a ghost. His mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. Jessica looked terrified. She was gripping Mark's arm so hard her knuckles were white. She was doing the math in her head. She was realizing that the poor librarian she had mocked could buy and sell her entire existence 10 times over before breakfast. Hello? Mark, I said. My voice was calm, amplified by the speakers. Elena? Mark wheezed. What is this, a joke? Harrington? You're a Vance. Vance is my father's name. I said, Harrington is my mother's, and the Harrington Trust has been my inheritance since my grandfather passed 3 years ago. 3 years? Mark whispered. But we were married 3 years ago. You had the money then? I did, I said. I had billions, and I was working 2 jobs to pay off your student loans because I wanted to build a life with you. I wanted us to be partners. I wanted to know that you loved me. Not my bank account. A gasp rippled through the crowd, but I continued, my voice hardening. You proved that wasn't possible. You left me because I wasn't elite enough. You told me I lacked vision. You told me I was stagnant. I looked at Jessica and you, I said, you told me I should find someone my own speed. I turned back to Mark. So I reviewed the acquisition deal for Nexus Solutions this morning. Mark's eyes widened. Elena, baby, please, let's talk about this. We can work this out. I was confused. I made a mistake. The deal, I interrupted, ignoring him, is canceled. Mark stood up, knocking his chair over. What? You can't. The company will go under. I'm leveraged to the hilt. I spent the bonus already. That sounds like poor financial management, I said coldly, hardly the trait of a vice president. Elena, please. He was sweating now. Desperation pouring off him. I have debts. This wedding, the house, I need that bit out. Actually, I said, glancing at Arthur, we are still acquiring the assets of Nexus Solutions, just the intellectual property and the client list. We are dissolving the management structure. I leaned into the microphone. That means you're fired. Mark, the word hung in the air. Fired. Jessica let out a screech. You can't do this. This is our wedding day. You jealous witch. Jealous? I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Jessica, look around you. I own the catering company that served your dinner. I own the bank that holds the mortgage on Mark's house, and as of 5 minutes ago, I own the debt collectors who will be calling him on Monday. I stepped back from the podium. I didn't come here to ruin your wedding. I said, I came here to give you a wedding gift, the gift of reality. I looked at Mark one last time. He was slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had chased glitter and lost the gold. You wanted a woman who fit your image. Mark, I said, you wanted elite. Well, now you know what elite really looks like. It looks like integrity, and you have none. I turned to Arthur. Mr. Sterling, let's go. I have a board meeting in the morning. Yes, ma'am, Arthur said. I walked off the stage. I walked back down the aisle. Elena? Mark screamed after me. Elena, wait, I still love you. It was all her. It was Jessica's idea. I heard the sound of a slap behind me. Jessica screaming at him, the guests murmuring, pulling out their phones to record the meltdown. I didn't look back, not once. I walked out of the chateau and into the cool night air. The valet brought the car around as I sat in the back seat, watching the lights of the venue fade into the distance. I let out a long breath, my hands were shaking. Just a little, not from fear, but from the release of adrenaline. It was done, the fallout was swift without the bit out. Mark's debts crushed him. He lost the house within 3 months, the car was repossessed. Jessica left him before the foreclosure sign even hit the lawn apparently. Her love for him didn't extend to living in a rented studio apartment. Mark tried to reach out to me. He sent emails, letters, texts from burner phones. He apologized. He begged. He claimed he was a changed man. He never replied. My lawyers sent him a cease and desist order. And that was the last communication we ever had. As for me, I went back to the library not as an employee, but as a benefactor. I donated a new wing to the city library system. I set up scholarships for students who, like the old me, were working 2 jobs to support their dreams. I kept my role at the Harrington Trust, but I realized that the money didn't define me any more than the poverty had. I wasn't the Billions, and I wasn't the librarian. I was just Elena. I met someone new a year later. His name is David. He's a landscape architect. He has dirt under his fingernails and a smile that reaches his eyes. On our 3rd date, I told him everything. I told him about the money. I told him about the trust. I told him about Mark. David looked at me, chewed his burger thoughtfully, and said, "That's cool, but are you going to finish those fries?" I laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it was a real laugh. Sometimes we hold on to people because we remember who they used to be, not who they are. We give them pieces of ourselves until there is nothing left. Mark taught me a valuable lesson. He taught me that true worth has nothing to do with net worth. He chased the appearance of wealth and lost the only thing that was actually really. Learned that the best revenge isn't screaming, it isn't fighting. It's simply standing in your truth and letting the other person see what they threw away. He wanted a queen, but he didn't realize he was already married to the ampersand by the time he figured it out. The throne room was closed. If you've ever been underestimated, or if you've ever had someone treat you like you weren't enough, remember this story. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Stay strong, stay true, and never, ever let them see you sweat.